Well, guys, I got a question for you. How many of you are guilty of saying, he's not on trail camera, he's not on cell camera, I'm not going hunting, he's not there? We've all been there, and in fact, I would say the majority of us are there right now, to the point where we put so much reliance and trust in these cellular cameras, normal cameras, that we bank on them 100%. Now, those of you that watch my videos know that I'm a big believer in woodsmanship, getting out, reading sign, seeing sign, and really understanding the deer movement for what it is. Trail cameras only cover a small amount of area, and although I do understand why we put them out to minimize pressure on the property and learn as much as we can. I decided that I was going to do a mini study, and I'll probably do an entire study across the season. Basically what we did is we sat over trail camera locations, and we sat in those locations. We counted how many deer we saw. We counted how many deer actually crossed the trail cameras, just to give us an idea of what we're seeing on these trail cameras. Is it accurate? Is it what percentage of deer are actually crossing them in a given scenario? Anything like that, because this property that we did it on, for me, is 9 hours away. Okay, 9 hours away from home, and I run a lot. It's almost embarrassing to say how many cameras on this property. 15 to 20 cameras, because I want to know what's going on here before I drive 9 hours one way to come down here. So we set up these cameras, and some of them have been up for months and months and months, and the trail camera photos haven't been great, and it got me to thinking, am I relying too much on my trail cameras? Now, I know this game, and I've been doing it for years, and I've done that where I've over-relied on them, and so now I'm to the point where I don't trust them anymore. It's not that there's anything wrong with the camera, it's how we use the camera. So I'm gonna break down the stats for you. Night number 1, we sat over a trail camera location that had good acorn crop, a little food plot planted in front of it, close to one of our blind locations. We ended up seeing a deer right away. We saw 4 or 5 does after that, and then we had an 8-point buck walk right under us, a small deer. 0% of those deer walked in front of my trail camera. Keep in mind, I do this for a living. I hunt for a living. I walk properties for a living. I put trail cameras in what I would say are good areas. I mean, I do this for a living. I see a lot of land. I should know where to put trail cameras. 0% of those deer walked in front of that camera. Night number 2, I'm trying to think where we ended up sitting. No, we actually sat in the following morning in one of our blind locations. Sat directly in front of my trail camera. Both of these sets, I could see my trail camera. Keep this in mind. I could see my trail camera. The second hunt, we were about 30, maybe yards away from my trail camera. We saw 7 or 8 deer. 0% of them walked in front of my trail camera. Keep in mind that the first night and that second hunt, all those deer were in shooting range of me. Okay, I didn't see them 200 yards off. They were within shooting range. They were close. Now here's the real dagger. The third hunt, we get back into the timber over this beautiful acorn crop, and there was no trail camera set in this location. But before the hunt, we brought a trail camera with us, and I said I would put it on this tree right here. If I would have put that trail camera on that tree, we saw 12 or 13 deer. 0% of those deer. 0% of those deer would have crossed that area. They were about 10, 15 yards away, all within shooting distance. So what am I saying, guys? 0% of deer. 0% of deer in my given scenario cross those trail cameras. Is that always the number? Obviously, that's not always 0%. Maybe it's 10%. But we put so much trust in trail cameras and cellular cameras, and it's not the cellular cameras issue. It's our issue. We're the ones screwing this up, because we put so much trust in these things. But in reality, think about how small of an area those trail cameras cover. And even 15 or 20 trail cameras on a property of 100 acres on that given property, I look around when I'm out there and I see that, and it feels like a lot. You would need 100 cameras to truly cover everything, cover every scrape, cover every trail, cover every food source. You couldn't do it, and you shouldn't do it. That's over the top, guys. So even 15, 20 trail cameras really isn't enough to give me a good idea as to what's going on the property, because literally, when we did sit it, and with that many cameras, 0% of the deer across 3 hunts walked in front of my trail cameras. Think about that. 0%. So what deer are out there that I don't know exist? So with that being said, I'm going to try and keep tabs on this the entire season and give you a season's worth of statistics as to how many deer cross my trail camera locations when I sit over those locations versus how many deer I see and everything else. Guys, I think it's time we look ourselves in the mirror and say, let's probably stop trusting trail cameras 100%. Use them as a tool, but don't 100% rely on just trail cameras. So here's the thing, guys. Trail cameras, do they truly suck? No. Trail cameras are useful, although they do miss pictures. I mean, they're electronic at the end of the day, so do trail cameras really suck? No. It's just the way we're using them. You know, here's the thing, guys. A lot of times we find ourselves putting these trail cameras in very micro, you know, I'll call them micro positions or micro locations. What do I mean? Well, it's just on this scrape or just on this trail. And what happens when things shift throughout the year and that trail or that scrape doesn't get used as much? Our camera is 100% watching an area in which deer might not be frequenting. So I like to put a lot of my trail cameras in areas in which I can get intel. And once I know my property good enough, I can put the puzzle pieces together from there, and that's what I would recommend you do too. So you keep maybe your trail cameras on a food source or in a known bedding area, in a general area in which, you know, it might not be the daylight picture where you kill him, you at least know he's there. And then you can go back and use that woodsmanship and the scouting you did in the off season to ultimately say, he's coming from this way, this is where we got to set up and kill him. A lot of times we put these trail cameras up hoping to get him right exactly where we're going to kill him. I just need to know he exists. And that's what I would recommend a lot more of you guys end up doing with your trail cameras, especially when they're 9 hours away, 5 hours away, an hour away, and you can't always get to them. See, here's the thing, like, if you can't move them a bit, which you don't want to be out there moving them just to move them, those micro locations might not always be the best location. So here's the thing, do trail cameras suck? No, not really. How we use them? Yes, very probable. Stop using our trail cameras in more micro locations, put them in the macro locations is what I'll call it. In our own given scenario, guys, we set up some trail cameras in the off season and we put them on micro locations. We put them on these trail systems. We put them on, you know, these little hidey hole spots. But in reality, a lot of those trail cameras have now gone stagnant. They've gone cold. We're not getting those deer on camera on those locations anymore. Thankfully, we did pick up a deer close to a food source a bit earlier this year, and now we know he exists. And we know the property well, so we know where the bedding is, we know where the historical sign is, so we can put the puzzle pieces together as to where that deer is coming from based off the direction that he walked in from and past his historical sign. So we know this deer now exists, and we got him on one of our macro cameras. As far as my micro cameras go, those micro locations are back in the timber, they're tucked back. I don't really want to go move them now, and I hate to say it, they're almost wasted at this point. So really think about where your trail camera is going to get the most pictures, the most inventory, and then use some woodsmanship, use some skill, use some scouting tactics from years prior to ultimately make your decision as to where you need to hunt those deer. Because those micro trail camera locations could be very seasonal, only hot for a week, a day, etc.